an Indigenous community in Queensland has banned Welcome to Country ceremonies, claiming they are embarrassing and being abused. The Juru people of the Burdekin said the elders have had enough with the commercialisation of it. Joining us now from Alice Springs is the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, Jacinta Nampijinpa Price. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. If an Indigenous group has said, well, enough is enough with this, what does it say about those who continue then to perform this ceremony at every event and occasion?
Well, Danica, you know, we all know that it's become, we have an Aboriginal industry that's currently set up in our country, and the whole Welcome to Country ceremony has just broadened that industry, if you like, and there are those right around the country whose basically their only role, their only source of income is delivering Welcome to Country. And, you know, to say that it's traditional culture, well, we didn't sort of have business transactions traditionally. Those business transactions didn't necessarily exist in that way, where you offered a Welcome to Country and then were paid given some form of payment in return. And again, this commercialisation of culture, which is exactly what is going on, I can understand there'll be those that will be upset if we try to bring it to an end. But I think there are other ways that we can encourage people to take up employment or take up opportunities in terms of money. But I think you know, this is demonstrating that I think everyone's getting sick of Welcome to Country, the Indigenous groups and the broader community.
Senator Price, you have hit on something absolutely magnificent. Next time an Indigenous group says it's cultural, we want to perform a Welcome to Country, the response should be, we want to honour the culture, so we're not going to give you any money, and it can be as it originally was. I want to get your thoughts on the Queensland State Government's decision to repeal Labor's Path to Treaty Act, which effectively scrapped the Truth-Telling and Healing inquiry 5 months after it began. What's left of the $300 million that's been allocated towards the Path to Treaty has been reallocated towards Indigenous health, housing, education. Now, as people would imagine, there's been the outrage from activists on the ground. I'm wondering if Indigenous people are feeling the same outrage, or maybe there's not that much angst about it from the everyday Indigenous folk who aren't involved in the you know, the whole industry that so often accompanies Indigenous affairs.
Yeah, look, I mean, I want to congratulate Chris Foley and his government for taking this decision to put that funding toward trying to, you know, gain practical outcomes for marginalised Indigenous Australians, because the whole treaty process, I believe, is a real, once again, I think a more sort of top-down approach. It's more of an elitist approach. If we look at New Zealand, nothing much has come about for the Māori as a result of the Waitangi Treaty. The Waitangi Tribunal has become highly politicised in pushing, you know, to block development. When I was over in New Zealand speaking to some of the members of New Zealand First, I'd been informed that you know, there's a lot going on in terms of blocking development for, you know, Māori people using their land. It's very similar to what's going on here, but everything is politicised. The treaty process has been politicised over there. No doubt that's what's been going on here in Australia. That money is much better being spent to produce practical outcomes on the ground for those who need it right now, living in a crisis situation, as opposed to developing treaties where we don't know, you know, the extent of that process. We don't know who is actually going to gain anything from that. And besides, you don't have treaties with one's own citizens anyway. We're Australian citizens. We've got to get past that point and start treating Australians along those lines on the basis of need, not race.
And this is a thing, Senator, because even in South Australia, only last week, I think it was the week before, they had their first address in Parliament for the South Australian voice. And we know that 60% of Australians voted no to the voice. What is actually going to satisfy these groups? Because they're forging their own pathways here. They're going against the Australian public. What is going to satisfy them?
Look, I don't know. I mean, ever since this industry was built, it's sort of an ever-evolving thing. I mean, Labor is so good at wanting to set up token commissioners, token organisations. The Voice was going to be another one of those token mechanisms. I mean, you know, the reason why my mother got into Parliament in the first place was because she was chair of the Indigenous Advisory for the then Henderson government and thought they're not actually interested really in what Aboriginal people have to say. They'll set up these token bodies and they'll pretend, they'll act as though they're doing something right for Indigenous Australians. And that's exactly what's going on in South Australia at the moment. I mean, it's a shambles. A number of those elected members of their Voice have since resigned from their positions. I don't know whether they've held another election to put up more members. There was only a 10% voter turnout in the first place. It's just an absolute shambles, and what it's supposed to achieve, I don't know. Maybe it's a handball for the South Australian government. Where anything Indigenous, oh, let's give it to the Voice and let them deal with it. We're not actually going to deal with it. Let's give it to them because it's too hardball. It's just nonsense, and you know, time will tell. And again, I think the Australian people say, well, look, we told you so. Let's move forward now as one country.